So this is what Ramana was pointing at in that reading. Essentially, the message of not two would be that you're not the body, obviously. Yeah. Now the I sense, or the sense of being an individual would come up with the body. So that would also be what's born and dies. Now, in recovery, in 12-step recovery, they use the word self, with like small s self. So in Advaita, or if you read Ramana Maharshi or somebody like that, they would use big S self as what you are, the ground of being or awareness or whatever the hell you want to call it, yeah? Self in recovery is small s self, the individual. And it's self, the ego. I don't use the word ego because it gets very confusing for people. But the thing I would mention when ego comes up is that this message is looking, that the sense of ego would have to arise to something. Yeah? So the ego itself would have to arise to something, and the message of non-duality looks at what that ego arises to. Because the ego would be what is born and dies, yeah? That arises to a sense of me. Now that sense of me also born and dies with the body. You see, so what's being born and what's dying is not you. That's what gets negated or inquired into and then negated from inquiry. So in recovery, there's this thing called self, which would be the sense of individuality. And it's the manifestations of that individuality which defeat us. Now, the main manifestation of individuality would be your thoughts. According to step 4, the main one in step 4 would be resentments. Yes? So resentments would be a manifestation of self. And they're defeating us because they keep presenting. The resentment presents itself through the mental system. And then that brings along anger and discomfort, self-centeredness, and then you want out of that self-centeredness. And the only option, if you're taking yourself to be the mental system, is to drink or drug, and that will seemingly get you relief from that sense of self, yes? So ego has to arise to something, yes? So for us to know that there's an ego, there must be something that thinks it's knowing the ego. That would be a presentation of two or duality. Arising, what's knowing arising, and you are neither of those things. So you would negate both of those to sit into what you already are, yes? It's like Ramana says, speaking of realization is useless because what you are is always realized. This is the paradox of spiritual practice. Is the head, or that sense of individuality, what you're identified as, is trying to get what you already are. And it can't get it. Because the head, the sense of individuality, is always trying to grab what we are as an object. Because that's all it can do. Because it's a dualistic system, yeah? So it's trying to turn subjectivity, not the subjective. The head is playing a kind of a false role of being the subject of a bunch of objects. That's what this is negating, yeah? But subjectivity, or the ground of being, it can't be objectivized, but that's what the head is trying to do. So talking about realization in a way is, as Ramana would say, ridiculous, because you're already realized, yeah? Really what we talk about is what we're not, or what we can see. So the thinking, the ego, you can see the sense of seeing the ego, which would mean you're not the sense of the thing that's seeing the ego. Yeah, so ego is too vast of a term for me. And it also, I find it drags people away from the root of what's going on here, which is the seeing. What thinks it's seeing, which would be the sense of being a seer, which non-duality would negate, that sense of being a seer, yeah? Because it's like in the Indian like writings, if there's a seer, there's a scene. So like I'm the seer, let's say, and then this lighter is what's seen, and then there's seeing. You see? It would negate all three of that. that triad. If there's a thought, then there seems to be a thinker, and then there's a thinking. You see, the only thing that's actually, if you were to argue it, that would be happening would be thinking. The thought doesn't have independent existence, nor does the sense of being the thinker. Yeah. So that those two get negated, and then there just seems to be thinking, which is moving through what you are, like clouds moving through the sky. It doesn't change the space of the sky. You understand? But we get stuck being the seer of the ego, and then we say, okay, now I am consciousness. But this is not it. You see, the head, the mental system's going to claim whatever it comes in touch with. Whatever, so it's seeing, as soon as the eye sees something, the head is identifying that and then claiming that you're the one who's seeing. Yes? So this is looking at that you're, the me who's seeing, to see if that has existence, independent existence, which it does not, obviously. That would be the whole logic of this idea that is getting put forth here. Yeah? So the head sees this through the eyes, and then it says lighter, and then it says you're seeing this. And then there's a sense of me being the body seeing the lighter. This happens internally with thoughts as well. Thought, sense of being the one who sees that thought. The head is claiming that you're there seeing that thought. And now you're bound to whatever the eyes see. You understand? Now you're the seer of all of that. And because it's tied you to the body, anything that this body has ever done, you are now the doer of that. It's like you're handcuffed. The head has you handcuffed to doing a bunch of stuff that you're not doing. This is the thing. You see, it's like freedom is now, but the head has you handcuffed through this belief because it keeps talking to you as you and says that you're doing everything. And without investigation, why would you question that? Yeah. Prior to investigation, there's no reason to hold that assumption to, what do they say, contempt or whatever. But as soon as you start to investigate, not into what's arising, but to who it's arising to, it's like a mirage, as they say, yes? So there's something arising, but it's not going to give you much refuge. Because it's just arising. It's not actually there. It's just like, it's how they would talk about this as like dreaming, yes? So there's seeing, there's tasting, touching, hearing. All of this is happening. And then the head is claiming ownership of that. And it's placing you as the one that it's happening to. So even when you listen to something like this, the head is claiming what's being said from this mouth here. It's claiming that. And now it's saying, okay, I understand. Or I don't understand. You see? Now that head that's saying that is then claiming that you're the one who understands. You see? So there's a bunch of action happening mentally. It's just that one of those actions is that it's claiming that you're the one who's doing it. And this is what is investigated and negated. And if something can be negated, it must not be you, yes? It must not be what your true nature is. The ground of being, we could say. So that's why this message is tricky, because what you're identified as is not going to get it. The head, the mental system cannot get this because it's a dualistic system. Yeah, it operates under the law of subject-object, and you cannot objectify what you are. The head can't grab space. It can't grab nothing, you see? That's why people seem to get very frustrated in this type of thing. Is because the head is trying to grab onto this and it can't do it. Which is great because you're not the head. So it's a good example to see that the head can't grab it. Because every time your mental system tries to grab it, you know that that's not you and that's what gets negated. Yes? You can know that your head does not understand this message. You can know that. So there's something knowing that. Yeah. So there's frustration, and then there's something seeing that the head gets frustrated, and you're neither of those things. That would be duality. If you have something to share or whatever, just put it in the chat thing, because I can't hear or see you, unfortunately, but I can see the little chat thing here. Yeah. So in 12-step recovery, then, this stuff was like shown to me, and it just like hit me, and it's very important to share. But in 12-step recovery, there's the arising of the mental system, except it's like hyper self-centered, because the mental system is already super self-centered. But in a person who's got the addiction thing in them, the bug or whatever, yeah, this is like hyper self-centeredness. So it's turned up, essentially. And it's super self-centered, and that gets very uncomfortable because all the thinking is about you. Yeah? So all the thoughts are about you, and they seem to be arising to you, and you can't seem to get out of those thoughts, but they seem to make you very uncomfortable. I know this, yeah. So like I would have a bunch of depressive thoughts, let's say, and I couldn't seemingly get out of them, and I couldn't seemingly change them. Now, there was no knowledge that I wasn't doing them or that I wasn't those thoughts. This was not known, yeah. So essentially, I was bound, what they would call the bondage of self, obviously, in recovery. The bondage of self is not an actual bondage. It's like you have an adhesive to the thought system because it's a misunderstanding that when those thoughts arise, you're doing them and that they're your thoughts. So you're bound, yeah, you have the bondage of self. Yes. And one of the main prayers in AA or recovery in general would be to release me from the bondage of self. Yeah, and like St. Francis Assisi, it's in self-forgetting that one finds. If you can forget self and then you're found, maybe you're already what's found, and it's self that needs to be investigated, not what you are, yeah? So we get bound to self. Thought arises, I feel like I'm doing it, and then that thought interprets to the body of which it's a part. So a bunch of depressive thoughts come in, and then my body would react. I'd get super cold. And then I seemingly couldn't get out of it, but I really wanted to get out of it. Yeah, so drinking became a good option because it could black me out. The thing is, that one doesn't last, and it has a bunch of negative effects. So those negative effects do not really pay dividends. And when I'm doing that every day, those negative effects build up, yes? So the thing is, if I'm not doing the thoughts, that would mean I'm not doing the reactions. It's like a program, yeah? So personally, I have like a bunch of abuse from when I was young, yes? So the way that this head sees the world is skewed. You don't have to be an addict or something to understand this, yes? Even if you're in the shower and you look at your thoughts, it's never about the shower. Yeah, you're thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. Most of your thoughts are about yesterday and tomorrow. You're not doing that. It's a function of the system. It seems to be how it operates, yes? So my head is seeing the world skewed, and it's seeing from core beliefs like everything is my fault or I'm not good enough, yeah? Now, I've worked with enough and talked to enough people to know that core belief of I'm not good enough or I'm less than is not unique. I'm not like a unique system. Yes, this thing is not unique. Most people operate under the idea. Yeah, it's not their idea. It seems to have been instilled. It's like programmed, like a computer or something. Ramesh Balsekar talks a lot about it in his book, Who Cares? And it becomes really, it becomes very vibrant in that book. It's called Who Cares? It's a great thing if you want to read it. Anyways, so this is what happens, yeah? And then I'm bound to what's arising in the head, even though it's old. It's old. It's not happening. You see? When I walk down the street and somebody beeps a horn anywhere and my head goes, I've done something wrong, that's not happening. But the head seems to think it's happening. Yeah? Oh, from Toronto. Nice, Ariana. Good. The head's telling me it's happening, yes? But it's not happening. So then what is spiritual practice, in my experience, is trying to get that movement to stop happening. But it happens so quick. It's so fast. The head is like the idea, and then the claiming, and then the claiming that I'm doing the thought is like instant. Yeah, in my experience. I've tried to beat it or stop it with spiritual practice, and it didn't work. Yes? But the message of not to cleared it up a lot in that I'm not doing it. I didn't see that, yeah? I thought I was doing all this stuff because the head is constantly suggesting, oh, and by the way, these are your thoughts, this is your body, you're doing this. Yes? And it doesn't matter how erratic that system is, I would keep blaming myself. This is the claustrophobia of this mental thing. So the more spiritual practice that I would hit it with or bury it, try to clamp down on it with, would reify that I was doing it. You see? So I'm trying to stop it now. This is why Ramana would say it's either surrender or self-inquiry. Yes? Because otherwise, any move we make is reifying that sense of being the doer of everything. And it becomes a misunderstanding. And then spiritual practice becomes the new addiction. Which I've seen this in my situation as well, yeah. Okay, so this is what seemingly happens, at least as far as my humble experience can be derived from it, yes? So there's a bunch of thoughts coming up, and then there's the claiming that I'm the one, me, those are my thoughts, and they're arising to me. Yes, so now I have to change them, or I have to alter them, or I'm bound to what they say, which is crazy, because in my experience, what arises mentally is super erratic. And if I'm bound to what they're saying, I'm going to go crazy, essentially. Yeah? So it's very important to see not only am I not the thoughts, but I'm not the one doing the thinking. Thinking is arising. The best way to see it is to investigate if you're the thinker. So it just goes right back to the I or the me, who all this seems to be happening and arising to, yeah? There's a thought coming up. Where's the thinker? Who's the thinker? I am. Where's that I inside the body? You can't find it, yeah? It's just nothing before the thought. It's just like space, in a way. Yeah? So you can see that it's like a program that unfolds. Sort of like, it doesn't unfold on its own because it's a program. So it's not inherently existent, meaning like it has independence. But the main point, I feel, is to see that it's not arising to a you. You see? Because then what arises doesn't grab. It doesn't have the same leverage. Because what gives thoughts leverage is our ownership of them. What gives thoughts all of the gasoline is like we're the gas that gets poured on the thought system. And then the thought system goes real big. Yeah? If thoughts arise and there's just a knowing that it's not, you're not doing that thought, it doesn't get life. It's just, you see? You don't have to go with it. Yeah. So it's really important to see. And if you're in addiction recovery, you know erratic thought. Yes? And you know the feeling of wanting to get out of that thing. But the real kicker is that you're not in it in the first place. That is the misunderstanding. Yes? Because self is what's defeating you. That's in the big book. Manifestations of Self has defeated us. Yeah? So that would suggest that there's something called self and the manifestations of that, and then there's you. That would put space between those two things, no? Manifestations of self would include thought. Would include thought. Can you elaborate on the theme, title, not 2 and 12 step? Yeah, I will in a sec. I just wanted this example. I have a friend in program and over Christmas, he did some stuff which he shouldn't have been doing. Yeah. And it doesn't matter about him. It's just, this is a good example. We were in a meeting the other day, and he was sharing that he is noticing that everybody else seems to be experiencing peace from the 12-step process, and he is not. And he was just sharing that he thinks something else is going on. Now, this person has been in the program for a long time. Yeah? So they know the big book and they know the steps. So what's happening is that there's thoughts and ideas and movements arising within that body which are taken to be his. Yes? They're still taken to be his. So he still would be identified with self, or the bondage of self, let's say. He's under the bondage. But he knows that those thoughts are alcoholic thoughts. So what has him tied to those thoughts? The only thing that could tie him to those thoughts or that thinking would be his identification as the thinker of those thoughts. You see, that's why I feel this is really important. This would go to your thing, not 2 and 12 step, yeah? Thoughts arise, and then there's a feeling that you're the one seeing the thought. Now, the idea that you're the one seeing the thought is an idea. It's another thought. A thought comes up, I should drink, yeah? And then what comes up? I see that thought. I see that thought is just another thought. It's two faces of one coin. Yeah? That would be two. Two things, yeah? Thought, seer of thought. This message is non-duality, not two. You see? So when thoughts come up, and thoughts are just one example, when thoughts come up, then the seeing of the thought. Now he's still identified as what's seeing the thought, meaning that he thinks he's the thinker of that thought. So he's bound to what it says. He's bound to what it says. That would be the bondage of self, and that would be a massive critical misunderstanding for someone like that. Yes? Now, is he going to change the thought? In 12-step recovery, the option would not be we're going to change the thought system. We're just going to lose faith in it because we see that it's failed us. Where's that faith going to go? To a higher power. Yeah? And then what's going to happen? Faith is going to be taken out of the thought system. It's going to be put into the higher power. And no longer am I going to react to the thought system. What's going to happen to the thought system? Find out. But in my experience, it gets way quieter and it changes. Yeah? By my forcing it to change? No. By my losing faith in it. Lose faith in it. Yeah? And it's not hard to see that the thought system is erratic. Like I said, if you're walking down the street and you reference your thoughts, your thinking is not about what's happening. It's way off. It's like about 10 years ago, or you're worried about what the world's going to be in 12 years or something. The head is like gone way out to lunch for the most part, yeah? Me and Tatiana live in Toronto, Ariana live in Toronto, yeah? And I bike in Toronto, and like when you watch people drive cars, their head is gonzo. They're like completely off. They're way out there, man. It's like they're not even paying attention to the huge vehicle they're driving or the bikers or all of this stuff. It's just the mental system is like completely firing off all these different things, yeah? All of that movement is arising to a sense of them. So they're bound to all that movement. And then what happens? They're anxious, obviously. How could you not be anxious? If you're tied to the mental system, you're going to be anxious because the mental system is an anxious system. So if there's something playing God, which is a saying from recovery, it's the mental system. It's playing God on everything. Yeah. It's labeling everything. It's forming images out of everything. And then it's got all kinds of opinions on everything. Those aren't your opinions. Those are programmed opinions. Yeah. I can see it when I go around. The head comes up with crazy opinions. They see a hat. These eyes see a hat that the head doesn't like, it just goes off on the stupid hat. That guy's probably an idiot, you know? It's just way off, man. It's way out to lunch. It's playing God everywhere, yeah? But it's playing a false God. So in recovery, we're looking at that sense of being the false God. Because our interpretation or perspective, the head's interpretation or perspective, is misleading us. That's not just in addiction recovery, no. And it's dualistic. One day you love your partner, one day you hate your partner. It's up, it's down, it's left, it's right. I'm enlightened. Oh, I lost it. I'm not enlightened. Neither of those are you. Yeah. So this is what gets negated. And oftentimes, yeah. I'm just going to look at the chat quick. Let me see. Why does AA instill in our mind that we do identify as self? Well, TK, that would depend on how you perceive the big book, yeah? If you read the AA big book, oftentimes self, it's pointing that you're not self. And if you listen to Joe and Charlie talks on if you know the 12-step program, Joe and Charlie, these two guys who just gave talks a lot, they passed away now. But if you listen to their talks, they're quite clear that you're not self. Yeah. So if you go to the big book and read it, there's a lot of like stuff that would point to this message of non-duality in that book. They might use a little bit different language like God and things, but I mean, if you read Advaita, it's going to be the same. Instill in our mind that we do identify as self. So it would be how it's getting read. Now, a lot of sharing in recovery, in my experience, doesn't touch the non-dual message, for sure. But, you know, I mean, introduce yourself as alcoholic. Yeah. I don't really know, to be honest. I think a lot of it is just kind of tradition and ways to make people feel welcome and that they're part of a group thing, you know. But I don't want to comment too much on that because I don't really know. And yeah, I'm not sure. But if you read the big book and look at the word self, they make it quite clear that you are not that. That is what is defeating you. And if you're being defeated by something, they would suggest that would be other than you because you're being defeated by it. Yes? Which is in a way great news because that means you can be free from what's defeating you. And in 12 steps, how are you going to be free from it? You're going to put your faith into a higher power, not into self. What's the manifestations of self? Resentment, thought, self-seeking, blah, 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 blah. All this self-centeredness, yeah. Now, the mental system is inherently self-centered. That's not going to change. This is the thing that I feel is very important. It's the loss of faith in the identification as the thinker of those thoughts, let's say. It's not trying to change the thoughts. It's not, because I've seen that fail in my own experience, but I've also seen it fail a lot in other people's experience. And then it's just another thing that they've done wrong. They can't change the thoughts, yeah? They read in a book, I need to be ever compassionate and non-judgmental. Yet the mental system is judgmental system. It's a dualistic system, subject-object. It survives only by being judgmental and dualistic. It can't see any other way than that. This is how this thing works, yeah? You're not going to unjudgmentalize your head. As soon as you see a car, the head says that's a car, don't walk in front of it. That would be a judgment. Yeah? As soon as you see a person, it's like, I like that one, I don't like that one. That's a judgment. That happens before you get involved, you see? Because the arising happens, and then super quickly it gets claimed that you're doing it. But it's happening in time. It's just very, very fast. So rather than trying to turn this mind-body into some spirit thing, yeah, I found it much more useful to lose faith in it and to see that you are what you're looking for, yeah, before this. And then this whole thing gets not that bad. It just chills out, you know? Yeah. Self-examination comes later. I think when someone is new in recovery, the focus on identifying as an alcoholic to remind them. Yeah, Ruth, you very well are probably right. You know, I don't really know that. I can't really touch on that, but that's very true. Yeah. How do you deal with running away from yourself and trying to find fulfillment in relationships that leads to many breakups, divorces due to wrong choices? This is the thing. This is good. Abira. Nice name. How do you deal with running away from yourself and trying to find fulfillment? Okay. This is the thing. This is not... Yeah. You could only want to run away from yourself if you're taking yourself to be yourself. Yes? So if thoughts are arising and you're tied to those thoughts, you want to get out of those thoughts pretty bad. Or you want to change them. So in my experience, the way to change them would be to get loaded drunk. Yeah, and that way I'm not bound to them. At least for a sense of time. Right? So how do you deal with running away from yourself? Is start to inquire who the self arises to. Yeah, so who is it that all these thoughts are arising to? That would be what this message or these talks are looking at. This platform in a way. Yeah. It's not looking at self so much. It's looking at who's it arising to. Trying to find fulfillment in relationships that lead to break. So relationships, yeah, it would just be like another form of trying to get out of yourself. There's a saying in recovery which is very important, also in any path, quote unquote path, which is self can't get out of self. You're not going to get out of the head as the head. Ever. That's never going to happen. Because the mental system can only see as the mental system can see. It's not going to see any differently. You understand? Self is not getting out of itself. Ever. So relationships, heroin, alcohol, sex, gambling, it's very temporary relief, if that. Yeah, but you always seem to be there at the end of it. Yeah. This is the thing. You're always there. When there's problems, it seems like I'm always there. Yeah, so it would be very important to start to look at I, or the role of self as far as recovery is concerned. 12-step recovery, the role of self. Yes? Good. If you're here you can look in the chat because there's people saying cool stuff about why we identify as an alcoholic. Yeah. Help folks have healthy relationships. Yeah, that's like for sure. I'm a relationship addict. You see, relationships are no different than any other addiction in a way. It's just people become the addiction. So the thing is, it's a way to try to get away from ourselves because we feel like we're in it. We feel like we're bound to what's arising mentally, which is often uncomfortable for many people, yes? So this is looking at who are those thoughts arising to. And if you're way in it and the mind is too busy, go do service. Because service will break it. The thought system is not that thick. It's actually quite thin, you know. If you threw a pebble through it, it would break. It's not this thick kind of movement. It's not as strong as we think it's taken to be. It's the ownership of the thinking which makes it like super strong, yeah? It's like all the clouds or all the planets of thinking are revolving around the idea of you, which is an idea, it's a belief. This is why it needs to be investigated. You know? It has to be investigated because it's not there. The head is saying that there's a J inside of this body, which is an independent thing. And it's a false assumption. It arises with the body and the head. It's born and it will die. That idea is born and it will die. And it comes and it goes. Because when you go to sleep, you're not there. Which is why a lot of people love going to sleep. Because they get a break from what? The idea that they're the one doing all this stuff. They get a break from themselves, essentially. Yes? It happens when you go to sleep, and then you wake up in the morning, the head comes back online, and the first thing it tells you is that you're doing all of this. Is that you're there, yeah? So that would be the first thought, as Ramana would say, I, and then everything else comes after that. Yeah. So to go into addiction would be to look at the role of self. Look at the role of the head and how it's misleading your life. Because self-reliance has failed. It doesn't take a lot to see that it's failing. Yeah. Next. I just want to feel whole on my own, so I don't need a relationship. Rather want and choose the right person. Okay, so what would be making you feel not whole? Yes? Would be the thought system. This would be an idea. Why would those ideas be there? Because of probably stuff that happened when you're young. I just know that from doing embodiment therapy with people. Ideas come up when we're young, yes? So our experience gets fragmented. This moves a little bit away from the direct message of not to, but it's important to see. The head has the thoughts, in my experience, that come up. There's a reason. They're not completely like random in a way. Yes, it's like I had things happen when I was really young, and then a lot of ideas, perceptions, misperceptions, grew from those. Yeah, one of those being the belief that things are my fault. Yes, so the head can still see that way, but it's not actually happening. You understand? It's not actually firing that way. It's a perception. It's this experience of life and body is a subjective experience. It's perceived. You understand? So it's different for each head, but you're not the head. But when you see why you think certain ways, like, why everything is my fault, you see how the head is programmed in a certain direction, and that, in my experience, helps you lose faith in that movement, because you see that it's old. You understand? You see that it's like not, you see that it's seeing through old eyes, and you lose faith in it. And then you see that the head is only seeing through old eyes. Everything becomes an interpretation or a perceptive experience of what's happening. It's not actually what's happening. You see? And that is very important, because when it comes to inquiry, that's what gets negated. And it's not so hard to negate that at that point. Yeah, because you see that it's an old idea presenting itself now. There's like so much space in that. What you were relying on, you can remove faith from, and then you're still there, because you were never that mental system in the first place, you see. It's the identification. This is why I feel, therapy can be confusing, and therapy is working on the individual, yes, so that hopefully that individual can get calmed down enough to see through that individuality. But it's looking at the individual. Yes, the 12 steps are doing the same thing in a way. It's cleaning house. So if you're in a 12-step program and you hear talks like this, and it's super confusing and doesn't make sense, it might be because if you haven't touched the steps, it would be because if the head is really busy, it's really hard to start. It's a lot easier to go do service or start working on the steps or do something to help clean up the individuality in order to then inquire into who it arises to. Yeah, if the head is really busy, it's hard to inquire who it arises to, because it's pretty frantic in a way. Yeah. Yeah. So, Abira, it just comes back to the same thing for me. You're not doing those thoughts and ideas. Yeah. So when those things arise and those urges arise to get out, you're not doing them. That would be the best way I would suggest to see it. As far as, unless I feel I put a lot of weight as an individual into the 12-step program. If you have addiction problems, Go to meetings, yeah. Because anything the head presents is going to come from that system, which which is perceiving weirdly. Yeah, anything the head presents is going to come from that. It's like looking through glasses, you know. This thing is this message of non-duality is like a new pair of glasses. You are what you're looking for, yeah? So if you put that on and then you start to see what's looking for you, or what is trying to get out of you, or what is telling you you're worthless and you need to go here, and you see that that is not you and that you're not doing that, that's like a new pair of glasses in a way. Yeah. So, I mean, I hear people talk sometimes and they go on and on. I have this problem and this one's coming up and this thing's going on, and it's all coming from the same identification, yeah? Just go to a meeting, man. Just go to a meeting and find a sponsor and do the steps. And then that stuff gets cleared up. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have a question or something they'd like to share in on? It's important. I think Advaita is important, which would be the Hindu or the Indian, what would come from India as far as non-duality. I'm not, personally in my experience, satsang isn't enough. Satsang is like, talking about these ideas is great, but it doesn't sit you in the thing, you know. People can have a PhD on Advaita and still be miserable. It just doesn't do it. It doesn't make sense, yeah. Settling down the system of this system, the mental system, and then inquiring is important. The thing that's been really good for me is embodiment, especially a text called Yasankana by a Zen master Hakuin, which has this soft butter method in it, to settle all of this down. Because when we go through life and things happen to us, our experience of wholeness gets fragmented, pulled apart. And our senses do that, our thinking does that, the body binds because of psychological bindings and stuff. This is what I mean by cleaning up the individuality through the 12 steps or through whatever, you know. To start to figure out why it's fragmenting, and then this system gets unified, like in Buddhist practice. In Buddhist practice, sitting practice, the primary intention would be to unify this system. So even when I do chanting stuff, it's chanting into the whole body to unify the body. Unify the body and the mind, and then pervade it with consciousness, which is already going on, but it's hard to do. And consciousness is all there is, really. Everything is arising in that. But if this is really disunified and fragmented and pulled apart and things, it's pretty hard to sit into it. Yeah? Reading 1,000 books will only give you a bunch of information, but what's getting that information is what you're not. That mental system is negated in the end of it. Yeah. A lot of great masters could, like Nisargadatta Maharaj, could barely read. You know, that should be like that's a good pointer. Okay. Anybody else want to put anything in the chat? Otherwise, maybe I'll read something from Nisargadatta. I think I got there's some quotes in this little collection here. Nisargadatta was a teacher from Mumbai. Okay, let's do this. This is a good one to read. So from Nisargadatta, I think this is from Prior to Consciousness, maybe the book or something. I forget where this is from, but I think it might be from there. The one which is listening, which you do not know, is you. And the one which you know is you, you are not. Yeah. The one which is listening, which you do not know, is you. So your true nature, what he's saying, what you are as the ground of being or awareness or Brahman or whatever you want to call it, yeah, you do not know. Because it can't be known because you're it. Yes? Everything that can be known is what you're not. That's why he says, the one which you know is you, you are not. So the idea of me gets negated or inquired into. From whence does that arise? Who am I? Whatever words you want to use. Yeah, the inquiry, like from Ramana, for instance. Yeah. So the one which is listening to this talk, which you do not know, is you. This would be seeing, but without a seer. Listening, but without a listener. Yeah. So the sense of being the one who's hearing this talk gets negated. The sense of being the one who understands this talk gets negated. Yeah. I'm not that, we could say. Yeah. Inside the body, you look for that. So you hear these words happening, and then your head is trying to figure it out. You go inside your body. Who is that head arising to? It's arising to me. And then you stick on that me point. And you see if you can find that inside the body, not outside the body. That would be more of a fragmentation. Inside the body. Yeah. So the one which is listening, which you do not know, is you. Because you're it. You are what you're looking for. Yes, let's say spacious awareness. You are already that, which is why Ramana says speaking about realization is ridiculous, because what you are is already realized, yes? But you can't know it. The head cannot know that, because you're it. Space, let's say. That's like as close as I would feel as you're going to get to that, yeah? But you are it, is the thing. So as far as a knowing goes, you could say space. Which you do not know is you, and the one which you know is you, you are not. So the one, that super confident idea that me, this body, yeah, he is saying you're not that. So the one who has all the addictions, the one who has all the thoughts and the emotions, the one who's at the center of it, that seems so confidently true, yeah, he's saying that you're not that. That would be very interesting, yeah, because if you look on the internet at what spiritual practice is doing, it's saying the opposite, yeah. It's saying you are the body and the mind, and that we're going to do a ton of stuff in order to make that stable or peaceful. Now, in my experience, the body and the mind are not peaceful movements. The head is anxious, the body's always changing, and as much force as I put in to try to make it perfect and stable, it seems to make it worse because I keep failing. But the failure is the real sight into it. Yes, because what's failing is not you. It's what we're identified as. And that's what gets negated through inquiry. Yeah, because you are what you're looking for. The deal is done. Yeah, whether we want to think it is or not, or have belief or faith or not have belief or faith, the fact is the fact. Yeah. So that's a great thing. The one that you're taking yourself to be is not what you are. From what you are, there's nothing separate. So there's nothing outside of consciousness, yes? Everything, the microphone, the lighter, the sweater, it needs consciousness to exist because it arises. The sense of me, I, the body, needs consciousness, yes? But consciousness does not need the body and the mind. It's ever present. Yeah. So the idea that J is the center of the universe would be a crazy misunderstanding. Self-centeredness would be part of what Gangamira would call the tyranny of the mind, yeah? Self-centeredness, because it's a misunderstanding. That self is what's in the center. And when self is in the center, it seems like there's this and then everything else, and everything else doesn't seem to be going the way that self, J, wants it to go. Yeah? But maybe the problem is not everything else. Maybe it's Jay's perspective. And maybe Jay's perspective is not Jay's perspective. Or it is Jay's perspective. It's just that what I am as a true nature is not Jay. Yeah? Jay is arising in consciousness. And Jay is going to disappear in consciousness. So if I'm taking myself to be Jay, I'm going to be pretty fearful of the end of Jay. I'm going to be super tied to what happens to Jay. And Jay is comes and goes, ups and downs, lefts and rights. And do I think that that duality of coming and going is going to change? No, I've tried to change it as it. And man, that's self trying to get out of self. That is drinking for me. Trying to get out of the instability of individuality. Because I didn't realize that my identification with it is giving it all its gusto. When my head comes up and tells me I'm worthless, if I'm taking myself to be the thinker of that thought, man, I'm worthless for 20 years. Yeah. But if I see that it's not, that thought is not a thought which is coming from what let's say I'm not the thinker of that thought, that it's an arising, it might last 3 seconds. Actually, it becomes pretty funny, you know? Because I'll look out at something and my head will be telling me that that person's way better than I am or something. It's just so completely off, man. It's off. The system is off. Oh. That's why this message is so good, Lorette. I completely get it. Now, who completely gets it? Yeah? What would get this message would be what you're not. No? One of the things I've found in this is as soon as my head mentally tries to grab not to, if I don't see that happen, my head morphs this, and now I'm the one who understands, and I'm bound again. Yeah? That's one of the beauties of it. Yeah. And I'm bound again. This would be like the hearing of it is to see that what thinks it's hearing this is not you. Oh, gee. That's so beautiful. Yeah. Okay. That book, Prior to Consciousness, reading won't get you there, but reading won't do it. But that book is Nisargadatta's last book, and he's like dying of cancer during the talks, and it's super interesting just to see how he answers questions and stuff when he's in like a complete amount of pain. Hey, Lorette, does it make sense when I say to you what I just said, in a way? You see that what is saying it completely gets it is not you? It would be very important to see that, because that's the head claiming this, what it's hearing. And if you see the head claim it, you'll see the head stick you to be the one who sees it. Just let me know in the chat if that makes sense to you or not. Because that's it's so good that you wrote that. You think so. Okay, you hear this message, and then your head goes, I get it. Yes? So see the head do that. Now Nisargadatta would say, you're not what's that. That arising, I get it. Yeah, I'm totally lost. It's great. Okay, good, Lorette. So I get it, yeah? Now, inquiry would be, who does that I arise to? Don't stop at the I. Yeah, because the I is the identification. That's the bondage. Don't stop at the I. Now you would inquire into who is that arising to. If you feel you're inside your whole body, I, where is that arising from? And stay with that inquiry. Yes? But it's very important to see that when you hear something, the head immediately claims that information. And it says, I'm the one who gets it. And guess who's getting pinned as the one is the body. Yeah? So it would re-identify, that is the identification. This is the paradox of this kind of thing. Okay, great. Good, good, good. So now you would just inquire into who it's arising to. Watch the head claim it. It's not just this message. Your head is claiming everything. It's claiming all the stuff that's going on, yeah? The seeing, the hearing, the tasting, all the gates. It's claiming it. So it's important to see that, because then you'll also see that when your head claims something, you'll see how it perceives it. And you'll see that that perception is gonzo. It's like off. It's not actually what's going on, yeah? It's why in Zen they would say, when you see your true face, you see blue as blue and red as red, for example. Yeah? Or you see your face before your parents were born. This kind of thing. Yeah. That's really good that you bring that up, Loretta, to see that. It's one of the... it comes back, yeah. It's just more presentation of the head. So it's like belief. Or, yeah, you could use the word illusion. Yeah. It's illusory in that the head is presenting itself as a permanent, independent thing. It's pointing to Lorette being an independent individual. This is the illusion. Remember, in my experience, non-duality is not it's not a denial. It's not saying that the idea or the I isn't arising. It's arising. There's a sense of self, for sure. There's a sense of individuality, and with it comes a sense of free will, yeah? Now, a lot of things I hear people say, well, I'm going to kill the ego. Well, the ego's, like you said, it's an illusory appearance, yeah? So it's not really living. There's nothing there to kill. Actually, the movement to go kill the ego would reinforce that you're there to kill the ego, which would be a misunderstanding again, yeah? But the claiming is super important to see. So it just comes back. Now, the thing is that I don't feel that's going to stop. The head keeps claiming stuff. It keeps trying to get free. It keeps telling us we're bound. It keeps telling us we're worthless. In a way, it's like the old, like the ticker tape, you know? It's just like, woo, hoo, hoo. It keeps going, yeah? Yeah, once you see the illusoriness of it, or how the head claims everything, and then it flips over, and then it flips over, essentially you'll just lose trust or faith in it. Yeah? You see that when it's arising, you're not doing it. You're not doing it. So there's space from it. There's space from it. So seeing the head claim this talk and saying, I understand, is really good, yeah? Because then you can hit it with, I'm not that, let's say, yeah? Now, in an absolute sense, everything comes from consciousness. So there's nothing separate. The I'm not that, or inquiry, is a technique to sit into what you already are. There's nothing separate from that. But it's a technique, you understand? Yeah. Because some people will they use I'm not that as like a sword or something, like they're going to fight. It's a very soft, like, I'm not that. I'm not the eyes, I'm not the ears, I'm not the thought, I'm not the one who sees. It's like casual. Because it's just an appearance that will keep appearing. You know? Even Ramana Maharshi was talking. He would answer questions. Something's coming up and answering those questions. He's not the body, but the body's appearing, and it's referring to questions that it's being asked. Yeah. That's so good, Lorette. Nice. It's good that you bring that up, because one of the crazy difficulties I find is when the head claims that it's the knower of this. Because if you know this message, then everybody else seemingly doesn't know this message. And at the same time, the awareness dwells in the body. The awareness pervades the body and everything else. That's a great question for you to inquire into. Where in your body is that awareness pinned? Find the point. And then come back and tell me if you found a point. Thanks, Ariana. Yeah. This is yeah. Leave with that question, Lorette. The awareness dwells in the body. That would be a sense of I, if I was to guess. Yeah. Don't leave that sense of I, because that is the bondage of self to the body. That is what thinks it understands this message. Huh? That's so good. So stick with that for sure. And make the thing about inquiry is, I have found through just talking to people and stuff, it gets very disembodied. People start to inquire outside of themselves, which they're not doing. It's a fragmentation. Like, a lot of people feel they live in front of their body or above their body, and they inquire there. So Lorette, make sure you're settled downward inside your body. Inquire inside. And don't leave that I. It's like what Ramana would say, yeah? Stick on the I, because that would be the point that you're saying awareness dwells in the body. It's like he would say it lives in the chest, but it doesn't actually, there's not a thing there, yeah? This is where mental ideas would get a little bit interrupted of direct experience, let's say. This is the best way I could put it into words, I think. Yeah. That's really good. Also, I just clicked on your picture and I see you're in Nelson, and Nelson is so good. Yeah. Just stick with the inquiry, Lorette. I don't think I'll have an answer anytime soon. You don't know that. This is more of the head, yeah? So this is more of the presentation of the mental. See you, TK. Yeah. So leave all of the knowing off to the side and stick with the inquiry inside the body. Yeah, because you are what you're looking for, and that's not in the future. There's just misunderstandings that that move that around. Like I'm gonna get there, or I will be there. Everything that's saying that is what would be negated from that reading we just talked about from Nisargadatta, yeah? The one you think you know yourself as is not you. That's what gets negated. So the idea that you're going to get there, or I'm not there, or I'm worse than, or I'm better than, or all of these ideas would come from what you're not. These would be like the pre-programming of the head. So stick with the I inside the body and don't leave that point. Oh, Al-Anon, that's good. There's also a really cool, I don't know if you're into Tibetan Buddhism, but there's a really cool Rinpoche. I'm going to put my email in here, right? And send me an email if you're interested. And if anybody has any questions or something, you can also email, of course. There's some writings that I came through the body a while ago, which I can also send people if they want those. But you just send me an email there. But there's a Rinpoche in a nice temple, and two of my friends are like high students, whatever the hell that means. They've been with this teacher for like 20 years. But if you're interested, Nelson's such a cool place too. But that will not that will not vary my. Don't leave that I. Yeah, cool.